Hey everybody, Nick Espinosa, your chief security fanatic here, and as you can see, I am still on the road. That's assuming you're watching me and not listening to me, but that's not what we're here to talk about. We are here to talk about dating apps and why dating apps could be a national security nightmare, but not for the reason you're thinking. And here's what's going on. I found this absolutely interesting. This is coming from the Wall Street Journal. Now, here's what's going on. The precise movements of millions of users on the gay dating app Grindr were collected from a digital advertising network and made available to sale, according to many people familiar with this situation. Now, this information was available for sale since at least 2017, and historical data may still be obtainable, basically, according to these individuals. Grindr, 2 years ago, cut off the flow of location data to any ad networks, ending the possibility of data collection, and that is according to Grindr. But here we go. Now, the commercial availability of personal information, which hasn't been previously reported, illustrates basically the thriving market, for intimate details about users that can be harvested from mobile devices. Imagine what you put out on a dating app, and forget Grindr for a moment. This applies to any dating app that is selling your information. I think Grindr is the tip of the iceberg. Now, for example, a U.S. Catholic official last year was outed as a Grindr user in a high-profile incident that involved analysis of similar data, meaning as you're aggregating all this data together, you start to pinpoint what people are using, and I start identifying who people are without actually knowing their name. Now, national security officials have also indicated concern about this issue. The Grindr data was used as part of a demonstration for various government agencies about the intelligent risks from commercially available information, and here we are. And that's one of the things that we are talking about in that vein, meaning, let's say you've got that government official and they are using a dating app, I don't care what their orientation is, and they are, let's say, pouring out intimate things to a potential partner. That gets sold, that gets stolen, that gets hacked, and that's a huge problem. Not to mention potentially outing government officials, some of which may not want to be outed for whatever reason. These are things that we have to really think about. Now, clients of a mobile advertising company have for years been able to purchase bulk phone movement data, including basically on Grindr users. The data did not contain personal information such as names and numbers, but, and I quote directly from the Wall Street Journal, who I have been paraphrasing, but I quote, "But the Grindr data were in some cases detailed enough to infer things like romantic encounters between specific users based on their device's proximity to one another, as well as identify clues to people's identities, such as their workplaces and home addresses based on their patterns, habits, and routines." Now think about this. You have a Google account. Let's say you're using an Android phone, or maybe you've got Google Maps enabled and integrated into your iPhone. Without telling Google understands work and home. Oh, you spend most of your time at this residential location? That's got to be home. Oh, you spend most of your time at this corporate location? That's got to be work or school. We are constantly being collected like this. And so imagine now you have these things in proximity as you are looking, let's say, through all of this data. If I am on a dating app and I basically, let's say I'm check into a hotel and another person checks into a hotel that's on that dating app that basically is now in the exact same proximity of me, the inference can be that I am there with that person because we met on that dating app, because we are both using that dating app. That's what we're talking about here. Don't need to know my name, but you start combining that with my location of home and work and everything else that is up for sale. We have a huge problem here. But again, this is also not what I'm talking about as the issue. These are things I've talked about for years, but this goes above and beyond. Now, let's continue before I start diving into my own. Location tracking data obviously has been increasingly been used for reasons beyond its intended purpose. Researchers earlier this year, for example, and I talked about this, spotted signs of the Russian invasion into Ukraine before it was publicly known by looking at things like Google Maps. Obviously, though, a lot of people were filming things on TikTok that basically had Russian tank columns heading towards the Ukrainian border. So this obviously is a huge thing. Now, Google later disabled those features to avoid them being abused in ways that could potentially affect the safety of Ukrainians in this conflict. And so we basically lost that avenue, but that's not to say that, the others haven't stopped. Now, Back to Grindr in 2019 said that basically it was the world's largest social networking app for gay, bi, trans, and queer people with, quote, millions of daily users who use our location-based technology in almost every country in every corner of the planet. Meaning, if they are essentially the number one dating app for that community and they are selling that information, that gives you a roadmap into what is essentially oftentimes a protected and targeted community. And that's what I'm driving at here, and we'll get to that in a second. Now, when the company Grindr originally began sharing its location data for its users with ad networks, the company's executives believed that this kind of data did not pose risks basically to privacy, and that is basically according to a former senior employee of Grindr. Now, at that time, the advertising industry executives told Grindr that hyperlocal ads for establishments just down the street from their users were going to reshape marketing budgets, and that is essentially what they were doing. So, for example, let's say you go into a neighborhood that is very heavily LGBTQ and you're on Grindr, and now they say, oh, well, you're within a block of, this very popular bar, those kinds of things. Now that bar can micro-target you based on your real-time location data. The problem that we have here, and this is what I'm driving at, is yes, we have the ability to identify, potential, let's say, senior government officials as they're using dating apps, not just Grindr. Don't misunderstand me here. I think this is a problem for everybody. But when we are looking specifically at very niche dating apps, meaning those that serve a specific community, and I know there are apps for basically like Jewish dating and dating for Asians and Black people and everybody. So again, it's not just Grindr. But when we are in the middle, and this is what I'm getting at here, of a culture war, especially look at Florida. There's this huge controversy right now with Don't Say Gay. Again, I don't care where your politics are on this. That is not what I'm getting at here. My point is that if they are able to, or the government, let's say, takes a position that is incredibly persecutorial, if persecutorial, like prosecutorial, is a thing for a specific community, then going to an app like Grindr and saying, okay, identify everybody on Grindr in my state, in my geographical region, in my country. Again, not just United States, they are worldwide. And so as we are fighting against, let's say, the rise of authoritarianism, and we have seen that, I really urge everybody to go read the book, How Democracy Dies. And it is eye-opening to essentially what we can see parallels into many countries around the world, including here in the United States. These are things that we actually need to consider. And I'm not saying that we are going to turn the dark night of fascism here, but when you've got people in a community that, let's say, is considered a minority in any which way, shape, or form, then that is of deep concern, because if they can be targeted by an overreaching government, and I literally just did one of these videos about 2 days ago on the FBI doing almost 3.4 million searches on Americans without warrants, that becomes a concern. And that's what I'm talking about here. So I think it really behooves us to understand just how damaging all of the information we give up on dating apps, to Google, to Facebook, you name it. That's a huge problem. But dating apps pose another additional layer on risk, because most of us are not really talking about very intimate, and by intimate, I mean sexual things, on Facebook in direct messages and those kinds of things. I'm sure some are, but dating apps, oh yeah. You better believe it. And I'm sure there are plenty of good people that wouldn't do that, but there are also plenty that do. And by virtue of that, selling that information or having access to that information, even if it's not giving out your name and your phone number, has the ability to connect you to with where you are, as I just said. So this is obviously a huge problem. This is something we need to address. But also understand, if you're single and you're on these dating apps, you might want to take it offline as soon as you meet a prospective match as fast as possible. And while you may look like a creeper or a stalker or something along those lines, obviously the other person has to feel comfortable too. But understand, the more you say on those platforms, the more it can be bought and sold. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP, where you will be data mined and bought and sold, as well as on YouTube as well. But please just still subscribe to me. Why not? And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please stay private. Thanks, everyone.